So this happened a little over a year ago, but it's taken me some time to even put it into words. It wasn't a disaster date, or one of those, he had a wife in another state, kind of situations. No, it was slower, quieter, and somehow that made it hit harder. Anyway, I 32 female work in a mid-sized design agency. Think open floor plans, Slack emojis, and way too many birthday cupcakes. I've been single for a while by choice. I dated enough to know what I didn't want, but I was still optimistic. Tired, but optimistic. That's when I started noticing Owen. Owen, 33 male, software engineer, worked a few departments over, mostly on the back-end development stuff I don't pretend to understand. He was the kind of guy you didn't really notice until you did, quiet, polite, always brought his own lunch, wore button-ups like they were a uniform. He wasn't hot in the loud, center of attention kind of way. More like subtle intrigue. Calm voice, thoughtful eyes. He never interrupted meetings, and he always held the door open even if you were still halfway down the hallway. No one really knew him. We had a running joke that he might live in the server room. The first time we actually spoke, it was over coffee. Literally. He reached for the creamer at the same time I did and apologized so softly I almost didn't hear him. Then he smiled, a kind of half-smile like he wasn't used to doing it often, and said, "Good luck in your 9am brainstorm. You looked like you were psyching yourself up." I laughed. Was it that obvious? He just nodded, grabbed his coffee, and left. It wasn't flirty. It was observant, weirdly kind. Over the next few weeks, we started having little chats in the kitchen. Nothing deep, favorite cereals, bad weather, which brand of oat milk was actually edible. But something about him made me curious. He listened. Like, really listened. He didn't rush to fill silences, and when he responded, it was always something thoughtful. Not witty or performative, just real. My coworker Sam called him mysterious in a slightly haunted way. Another coworker joked he was probably writing a novel about us all. But I don't know, he just seemed private. Not shady. There's a difference. About 2 months after our coffee machine friendship started, our company hosted a Friday mixer at a local rooftop bar. The kind where you pretend to like kombucha spritzers while praying no one makes you play team trivia. I wasn't going to go, but Sam convinced me, said it would be good for networking, which is code for you'll feel less like a hermit. Owen was there, standing near the railing, sipping a soda like he'd wandered into the wrong party. When he saw me, he smiled, the same half-smile I was weirdly starting to recognize. "Didn't take you for a rooftop mixer type," I teased. He looked out at the skyline. "I'm here for the free sugar and the view." We ended up talking for most of the evening. It wasn't even flirty at first. We talked about cities we'd lived in, music we missed from college, how neither of us understood NFTs. He was funny in this dry, blink-and-you-miss-it way. At one point, I told him about my childhood pet hamster named Bagel, and he just said, "I bet he was emotionally carb-loaded." I laughed way too hard at that. Something shifted that night. I started noticing how his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he always paused a beat before answering, like he actually thought before he spoke. At the end of the evening, he walked me to my Uber. Right as I was about to get in, he asked, kind of abruptly, "Hey, would you want to maybe get coffee sometime? Not in the break room," I blinked. "Like a date," he nodded. "Only if that's something you'd want too," I smiled. "Yeah, I would." And just like that, we had a first date lined up. We met up the following Saturday at this little coffee place near my apartment. It was one of those cozy, plant-filled spots with mismatched chairs and baristas who look like they're in a band. I was early, classic me, and tried to act casual while nervously rearranging the sugar packets on the table. Owen showed up exactly on time. Not early, not late. Right on the dot, holding a book under one arm and looking slightly apologetic for existing. It was endearing. "I wasn't sure if I should bring this," he said, holding up the book. "But I always feel weird without something to read in public." "That's extremely specific and somehow makes total sense for you," I laughed. He smiled and sat down. I wasn't sure what kind of date this would be. "Me neither," I admitted. "But it's a Saturday and we're here, let's just figure it out." We ended up staying for 2 hours, maybe 3. We talked about everything and nothing. Favorite obscure movies. Worst family vacations. The time I got caught shoplifting a keychain in 7th grade and cried so hard the store manager gave me a hug. He told me he once accidentally brought 2 left shoes on a high school trip and spent the entire weekend limping through DC like a Victorian ghost. It wasn't some epic rom-com first date. It was better. It was grounded. comfortable, like we were both finally exhaling after holding our breath around everyone else. Still, there was something guarded in him. He was open about surface-level things, but skilled at gently rerouting when the conversation got too personal. I didn't push, but I noticed. At the end of the date, he offered to walk me home. We joked about the awkwardness of first date goodbyes and ended up doing the weird side hug thing that says, "I'm interested, but also nervous about misreading this." I went to bed smiling that night. Not giddy, not spinning into fantasy, just quietly happy, that kind of happy you don't want to jinx. After that first date, things moved. Slowly. Not in a bad way, in a we're both grown adults with full-time jobs and complex inner lives kind of way. We texted every day, but it wasn't constant. No 3 a.m. essay texts or good morning, good night routines. More like, this playlist reminds me of your bagel story. Coworker tried to sell me essential oils at lunch. I'm too tired to join a pyramid scheme. 2 weeks later, we went on our second date, a Sunday afternoon at a used bookstore that also served really questionable espresso. He showed up wearing a gray sweater and that same shy smile, and honestly, I was already halfway into a crush. We walked around for hours, picking out the weirdest book titles we could find. At one point, I found a 1974 cookbook called Cooking with Cottage Cheese and dared him to read a recipe out loud in a fake French accent. He did. Loudly. I have never laughed so hard next to a display of post-apocalyptic fiction. That's when it started feeling like something real. And then, something odd happened. It started with a totally normal story I was telling, about a trip I took to Seattle with my ex-boyfriend a few years back. It wasn't a sad story or anything. Just a funny bit about trying to hike with bad shoes and spraining my ankle half a mile in. When I finished, Owen nodded slowly and said, "Oh, I thought you said you'd never been to Seattle." I paused. "I don't think I've ever said that." "You did," he said gently. "In the kitchen at work, when we were talking about dream cities." I laughed it off. "Maybe I meant I'd never lived there." He nodded, but he got quiet after that. Not cold, just thoughtful in that distant way people get when they're trying to line things up in their heads. Later that night, I replayed the conversation. Not because I thought I'd messed up, but because something about his tone stuck with me. He wasn't accusing me of lying. He was clocking it, like he was keeping a tally in his head, and I started noticing more of that. Like when I told him my younger brother lives in Texas, and a week later he said something about me being an only child. Or when I mentioned I didn't drink much, and he reminded me that I'd once said I loved mezcal cocktails. It was never confrontational, just quiet corrections. Like he had a spreadsheet of my life and kept highlighting the inconsistencies. At first, I thought I was being overly sensitive. I mean, everyone forgets details, right? Relationships are built in layers, and not every layer aligns perfectly. But I couldn't shake this weird feeling that Owen was listening too closely. Not just listening, recording. There's a difference between someone paying attention and someone building a mental file on you. About a month into dating, I was invited to Owen's place for the first time. He lived in a condo building about 15 minutes from mine, a quiet second-floor unit with clean furniture, soft lighting, and the faintest smell of eucalyptus and old books. It was very him, minimal but thoughtful. Shelves organized by theme, not alphabetically. "That's how my brain works," he'd said. An ancient but beloved coffee grinder on the counter, a giant poster of a Miyazaki film over his couch. His place was so tidy it almost felt staged, but not fake. Just lived in by someone who needed order. We were planning to cook dinner together. I brought wine and a playlist, and he made a mushroom risotto that was honestly better than it had any right to be. Somewhere between the chopping and stirring, I noticed a hallway with 3 doors. One clearly a bathroom, one a bedroom, he'd left the door open, and one completely closed. The kind of closed that feels deliberate. Naturally, I didn't ask. It wasn't my place. I mean, everyone's entitled to a room they don't want to show off. Maybe it was a laundry mess or a storage zone. But later, when I asked where the recycling was, he said, "In the bin next to the second bathroom." Second bathroom. I hadn't seen a second bathroom. He caught himself quickly. Sorry, force of habit. I meant the kitchen trash. My old place had 2 bathrooms. But the way he said it was off, too fast, too clean. Still, I let it go. I wasn't there to interrogate. I was there to eat risotto and maybe fall asleep watching documentaries. But something kept nagging at me. Because the next time I came over, about a week later, the same door was still shut. Only this time, it had a sliding lock on the outside. And that felt weird. It wasn't just a lock. It was a bolt on the outside of the door. The kind that locks someone in. I didn't say anything in the moment. We were in the middle of planning a trip to a flea market the next day, and I didn't want to spiral without context. But when I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I did what any curious, slightly anxious woman would do. I Googled, "No, not is my boyfriend secretly a serial killer?" I'm not that dramatic. Usually, I Googled his name just to see. Not in a creepy way, more like verification. And nothing major came up. No arrests. No alarming Reddit threads. Just a few professional mentions, some old blog post about Python frameworks and a guest panel at a tech conference 2 years ago. All clean, but still that door. The next time I came over, I mentioned casually that I thought his condo was a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. I watched his face. He didn't flinch, just nodded and said, "It is." I waited. Then I asked, "So what's the room at the end of the hall?" He blinked. "Oh, just storage, old equipment and stuff." "Why?" I shrugged. "Just curious." The bolt threw me off. There was a beat of silence. Then he said, "It came that way." I never got around to removing it. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But my stomach twisted anyway. Because while I was asking, his thumb had started tapping against his leg. Not fast, just enough to register as nervous energy. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I was being cautious or paranoid. After that night, I started pulling back a little. Not dramatically, just enough to create space between us. I didn't cancel plans. I didn't ghost him, I just slowed my replies, said I was busy more often, took longer to confirm things. And the thing is, Owen noticed. Of course he did. He was observant in a way that made me feel both seen and slightly overexposed. The kind of person who could detect emotional shifts, the way a pilot senses turbulence before it hits. One evening, we went for a walk after dinner. A quiet, leafy neighborhood filled with small dogs and solar-powered garden lights. We were halfway through a conversation about music when he stopped mid-sentence and said, "You've been pulling away." No preamble, no accusation in his tone, just data. I paused. "What makes you say that?" "You're less present," he said. "The tempo's changed." I gave a small laugh. "That's very analytical of you," he shrugged. "I'm not trying to corner you, just trying to understand." I thought about deflecting, about saying work was stressful or I was just tired. But the thing is, I liked Owen, enough to not insult either of us with a lie, so I said the door weirded me out. His face went still, not angry, not offended, just unreadable. "The bolt," I added. "It doesn't make sense." And I guess I started wondering if there's something you're not telling me. For a long second, he didn't speak. Then he nodded once and said, "Do you want to see what's in the room?" I blinked. "What?" "I mean it," he said. "You can see. If that's what it'll take to feel okay again." I hesitated. "Are you sure?" He looked down at his hands. "I'd rather show you than have you build a whole alternate reality in your head." Fair. So the following evening, I went back to his place. Heart pounding. Part of me afraid I'd find a mannequin collection or some kind of doomsday bunker. Instead, it was storage, like actual storage. Boxes, old monitors, camping gear, and what looked like half a disassembled treadmill. Dusty shelves, a broken desk chair, a duffel bag full of tangled charging cables. The bolt, it turned out, had come with the unit. Apparently the last owner had used the room as a guest suite and added the lock when they hosted international students long-term. We even found the installation receipt from 6 years ago in one of the boxes. I stood in the middle of the cluttered room and exhaled. Owen leaned against the doorframe. "Kind of a letdown, right?" I laughed. "Slightly. I was hoping for at least one cursed object." He smiled faintly. "Sorry to disappoint." I turned to him. "Thank you for showing me, you didn't have to." His shoulders dropped slightly, like he'd been bracing for something that never came. "I wanted to. I know I can come off closed off, or too precise. I wasn't trying to be shady. I just have a habit of keeping things neat, even feelings." There was a silence. Then he added, "I've had people assume things before. That I was hiding something just because I didn't spill everything up front, so I started holding back. It felt safer that way." I nodded. "I get it, I really do." We stood there for another moment. In a dusty storage room that somehow became the most honest place in his apartment. That night, we didn't kiss goodbye. We just held each other for a long time in the doorway, the kind of hug that says, "I still want to try." After the room incident, something shifted, but not in the way you'd expect. There wasn't some dramatic, and from that moment on, everything was perfect kind of turn. No movie montage. No saxophone playing over skyline views. What changed was quieter, simpler. We talked more. Not just about work or bad weather or niche memes, though those still made their appearances, but about real stuff. The kind of stuff people usually keep buried under charm and small talk. Owen told me about his last serious relationship. How it ended not because of some explosive betrayal, but because neither of them could really connect. It was like we were both fluent in different emotional languages, he said. No translator. I told him about my tendency to overthink everything to death, how I sometimes imagine problems before they exist, like a doomsday prepper with anxiety. He didn't flinch, just said, I think you're fluent in context. That's a good thing. We didn't have wild dates or sweeping gestures, but we had grocery runs that turned into philosophical debates over cereal branding. We had late-night walks with no destination, just shared air and half-finished thoughts. He started keeping oat milk in his fridge, just in case. I started saving him screenshots of code jokes I only halfway understood but knew he'd laugh at. It wasn't magic, it was maintenance. There were moments that weren't easy, like when I snapped at him after a stressful meeting and he went completely silent, not in anger but in defense. I had to learn that silence wasn't him shutting me out, it was him processing. And he had to learn that sometimes I needed him to react, even when his instinct was to pause and fix things later. One night, after a miscommunication over weekend plans, I thought we were going to the farmer's market. He thought we were having a lazy movie day. We ended up sitting on his couch eating leftover noodles, both of us half annoyed and half exhausted. That's when he said, out of nowhere, we're very different processors. I laughed with a mouthful of rice noodles. Wow, romantic, he grinned. I just mean, I think I run on background tasks. You run on push notifications. I choked on my laugh. Okay, that was actually brilliant. It became a running joke. When we'd get overwhelmed, we'd say running a background process or too many tabs open. It helped. We started figuring out each other's defaults. Not changing them, just learning to navigate them. Like relationship software updates. Small patches, nothing flashy, just bug fixes and better loading time. About 3 months in, we had our first real argument. And I mean real, not a miscommunication, but a full-on, can we work through this kind of disagreement? It was about time, or more specifically, quality time. I'd been feeling like our connection was plateauing, and he felt like I was pushing him to constantly perform emotionally. It sucked. We were both defensive. I cried. He got quiet. I thought maybe this is where it ends. But after we cooled off, he said something I'll never forget. I want to get better at this. I want us to be fluent in each other. That night, we wrote what we jokingly called a low-stakes treaty, not a real document, just a shared note in our phones titled Things That Help. Mine included stuff like eye contact when I'm venting, physical affection on stressful days, affirmations when you're proud of me. His included time to process before reacting, clear phrasing instead of hinting, patience with pauses. We never had to refer to it again. Writing it was enough. Okay, so here's the part where I do that thing Redditors always do, the sorry I never updated, life got in the way bit. And yeah, guilty. I didn't mean to ghost you all, I just forgot. Not because it wasn't worth updating, but because, weirdly, the story stopped being a story. It just became life. It's been 5 months since Owen and I had our low-stakes treaty night. And somehow, against all my anxious predictions and worst-case scenario spirals, we're still here. Still dating. Still figuring each other out, one background process and notification ping at a time. We're officially boyfriend and girlfriend now. We had the conversation during a rainy walk back from the movies, soaked and laughing because we both forgot umbrellas. I think he said something like, "So, are we monogamously confused together now?" And I said, "God, I hope so." Work's been busy for both of us. I had a campaign launch that nearly turned my brain into soup, and he's been wrangling a product migration that makes my eyes glaze over every time he tries to explain it. But we've found little rituals that help keep the stress from eating us alive, like 9 p.m., no laptop zones, or spontaneous trash food therapy nights read, ordering mozzarella sticks and watching weird niche documentaries, or our Sunday ritual of walking through the local plant nursery, even though we've both agreed we do not need another succulent. We still argue sometimes. Not often, but when we do, it's not dramatic. It's more like maintenance, course correction. Sometimes it's about tone. Sometimes it's about needing more time. One time it was about whether or not it's morally acceptable to reheat fries in the microwave. It is not, for the record. What's different now is how we argue. I don't spiral into silence. He doesn't disappear into himself. We check in. We say things like, is this a fix-it moment or a listening moment? Or I need 10 minutes before I can talk without being defensive. We're still learning, but now we're learning together. If I had to sum it up, I'd say this. Dating Owen hasn't felt like falling off a cliff. It's felt like building a really good campsite. When you add to slowly, a tarp here, a better lantern there, it's not flashy, but it's solid, it's warm. It feels like something that might actually last. So yeah, that's the update I forgot to post. We're still here, still us, still quietly choosing each other. And I think, for the first time in a long time, that's enough.